Well, this is old electronics fan, and this is my Motorola 68L11. I did restoration on this a while ago, and I wound up with, when I got all done, it seemed to work fine. In fact, as you can see, it's playing. I've got my, let me pause that for a minute. Well, first I'm going to show you what it's doing. Not that one. You should be able to hear that, I think. That's what's called a microphonic tube. And when I had repaired this radio, I think this was, I don't know, first or second one of these that I battery powered radio. So these are 1.4 volt tubes, and I just thought, well, that tube there's something wrong with that tube. I grew up with tube stuff. That was all that we had when I was growing up, and microphonic tubes are nothing new to me. And typically, when the tube goes microphonic, there's something wrong with it. You need to replace it, and the microphonic tube will also affect the audio. So, I talked to some guys who spent a long time restoring these, and one of them said, well, you've got a 1S5 tube in there, and those are known to have that problem. So I took this 1S5, wrapped it to try to prevent it from ringing. Did not help. Tried another one, that didn't help. And he said, well, get a 1U5. Those are supposed to be better. Well, it's a 1U5 that I put in here. I don't know if you can see. I'll put some light on it. Yeah, nice noise. Surprising. So I marked it on the chassis just so for future persons working on this, they would know that's a 1U5 and not a 1S5. But the as you can see, it didn't make any difference. Now, so the question is that a problem? So let's play this music. You can't really hear it. I got that up fairly loud. You can't hear it. That tube is not ringing. So I'm thinking that I wasted a lot of time swapping a tube that's maybe slightly better than that one. So I'm going to be insane, and I'm going to do something which, well, I don't know if, well, I am going to do it. I'm going to rewire this, because to put that 1U5 in there, the pinouts are not the same. The filaments are the same, but all these pins are different. Pins 2, 3, 4, and 5 have different connections in the tube. So I rewired this for that tube. Obviously the tube is working, so I did it right. So now I'm going to rewire that socket for the 1S5 that came with this, because I am going to get this all completed. This is going up for sale, and I had thought about putting in this radio in a modified circuit diagram showing what I had done, but given that this 1U5 is doing the same thing as the 1S5, I don't see any reason to do that. That's a bit of work, but it is what it is. And the other thing is, I have since worked on other battery-powered radios, and the miniature tube types, and I've run into the same problem. and I believe it's the detector tube that's where I regularly run into this. So it seems that there's something about the detector tube, and I'm trying to remember if the larger 8-pin tubes, if I run into it there as well. I might have. So I'm not exactly sure why the detector tube seems to be the culprit, but it seems to be. Now, if the 3V4, which is the output tube, were to be microphonic, you could be pretty sure that that would be affecting the audio, but it's not. So I'm going to take this, rewire it, see how bad that one is, and see how it plays. Because the bottom line is, how does the radio sound? Does the fact that that tube is microphonic, does it affect anything? So that's the other reason why I wanted to do, well, this has been sitting on the shelf for quite a while. I can't remember if I actually checked this out. When they had the 1S5 in there, as far as whether or not it was affecting the audio, especially at higher volumes. I don't recall that. Well, I got interrupted by a phone call, but I was about to do the change on this, and I realized I wanted to check something. And I don't want to be too energetic with moving this. But one of the things I noticed with the other tube was that just gently setting this, it's hard to hear. All I have to do is tap on the chassis and it rings. But it doesn't show up over here, so proximity to the tube seems to make it worse. I'm going to then compare how this behaves to the other tube. Bottom line though is, if this works fine, if it sounds okay, and I think it did, I'm going to leave the 1S5 in here and consider this radio done and ready to send off somewhere. Well, yeah. Well, this is the 1S5 tube back in there, and it rings a whole lot more. And when the radio starts up, I don't know if it'll do it now that I've been playing it for a while. Hear it ring when it comes up. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Now, this is another 1S5 that I wrapped up. And the reason I felt like I could do this was because these tubes don't get hot. They might get slightly warm, but they don't get hot. So, let's see. I may wind up going back to what, oh, yes. Well, actually, let me just put this back down again. It's doing the same thing. Well, that does make a difference. Big difference. Okay, so it still rings, but not as badly as this one does. And it does do that strange little ring when you start up. Of course, now that it's starting and run, it probably won't do it, but yeah. You can hear it. It rings when it starts. But I think, now, let me, it's been a fun time. This, I had to fix this to use with this. And I did get it fixed. And you can hear it ring if I just bang the desk. Huh. It would be really nice if those were the same pinout so we could swap them back and forth. I may wind up doing that. Wow. Anyway. what happened to this? Well, it was intermittently cutting out. It was producing a lot of static when I was trying to tune it. And turn this down a little bit. And yeah, it's not doing it good now. Good. And right now I've got this pause, so there's no this is paused, so there's no. Okay. And that's what I run into. If this isn't playing, this thing will ring back. So let me finish what I was saying, though. I wound up pulling this off, taking the cover off, and shooting canned air into this, and turning these trimmers to fix my problem. It was intermittently going in and out. All you had to do was just tap it. Okay, let's just play this if I can get it. Are we playing? We are. All I had to do was tap it, and this would go in and out. And what it turned out to be, and I don't know how or when I did this, little fine bits of metal had collected on here and here. Let me just show you this. All right, let's turn this off. Little fine bits of metal have collected on top of here and here, and these are, if these are rotated a certain way, they almost touch. But I also noticed, and I'm not sure if that was the issue. Boy, that's not good. I guess I'm going to go back to the other tube. Live and learn. So anyway, I don't remember if these were rotated so that this part and this part were close together, but I did find little bits of metal in this shield. I'm going to turn you off right now. You keep trying to ring at me. So I took this apart, rotated it one way, cleaned it carefully, used a little screwdriver to help remove some of it, and shot it with air, rotated it 180 degrees, did the same thing, shot air in here to get into the tuning part, because you got tuning capacitor here and here, and so when I got all done, it was fixed. I must have been cutting something with my Dremel tool, and the filings from that got into this. I don't recall this being anywhere near where I was working, but obviously it must have been. I must not have paid attention. So what's going to happen is that this is going to get mounted in its own case to protect it from any dumb moves by me. But so and it's probably a good idea to keep any kind of dirt and crud out of here. But this gets to the other point that I was heading for. When I put it all back together, of course, these trimmers were no longer in the right orientation. They weren't properly adjusted. So I adjusted it where I thought it would be good, and then discovered, number one, they weren't still where I wanted them to be. But number two, under certain conditions, this thing would start howling. If I wasn't playing this and I was tuning this and it was just sitting here, this thing could howl. It would start feeding back and howling. And I'm pretty sure that this, I'm pretty sure that this tube right here was my culprit. Now, I was rather dismayed when I originally put the 1R5 in there, or there's a 1S5, 1R5, whatever, 1U5, that's right, 1U5. I was rather dismayed when I put the 1U5 in there, and it rang, but that behaves a whole lot better than either. Actually, I have 3 of the 1S5s sitting around here somewhere. There's a third one. Is this it? This might not be. Yes, there is. I have 3 of these. I ordered tubes from somebody, and they sent me an extra one. This is the extra one, and I had to actually sand the pins very carefully to, because these are all corroded. That's just probably why he sent it to me for free. But it seems like all 3 of the 1S5s are doing this. So I wish I'd remembered more about this, but it's been a very long time since I played around with this, so it is what it is. Oh, so I was wondering why, I was wondering why a radio would go into production with that kind of a problem. Let's see. I think it's like this. And I guess my conclusion is Zenith. I'm just curious to see, because I have a number of these battery-powered radios, and that one does not use the same tubes. Let's go to Philco. Let's see. So, like I said, I've worked with a number of these battery-powered radios, and it seems as though a number of the detectors do this. I probably already said that, but well, it's been a few days. This is not the first time, though, that I've run into a case where I think it was RCA made a tube, and I can't remember the tube number, but it turned out it had a problem, and they had to come up with a new version of that tube because the original was just not good. I would assume that when they did that the replacement had the same pin out. I think it did, actually. That's why this is what makes this such a pain in the neck, because you can't just swap the two. So I didn't run into the problems I'm experiencing with this one, with the 1U5. So I think that answers my question, because I was getting ready to put this all back together and send it down the road, and I realized I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, because I was really hoping that I could send this out with it being wired, well, with the original tubes in it. And unfortunately, I guess what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create a decal or put a sheet of paper in here warning that this is not the original tube and not the original wiring, for anybody who might have to work on this in the future. I kind of hate to have them start tearing their hair out and either deciding that the schematic they got was wrong, which happens far too often, or it's a different variation or whatever, or that some chucklehead wired it wrong. You know, there's lots of things you think when you run into stuff that doesn't line up with the schematic. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure the 1U5 didn't behave as badly as this one, and so this rubber wrapping that I put on here is it's just not going to do it. It's not going to work, which is kind of disappointing. It's not pretty, but it did calm it down. You saw how the first one behaved, how bad that one was, and how easily that one would ring. So this is an instance where a tube can be faulty as originally designed. So I guess what I do next is rewire it again, because I don't see, boy, do I want to do that? I have sockets, but I don't think I have any way of properly wiring that so that because you need a pin, you need a wire of this thickness to go into the socket properly, and I don't know if I have something that would work for that. There might be ways, but I think, where is I think, come back here, you. So I'm actually swapping, I'm only swapping these two and these two. And these two are right next to each other, so that's not hard, but these two are opposite. I'm just still thinking about putting a 7-pin socket on there, and just see if I can see the difference between the tubes. I think I did see enough. Now I can't remember, what did I do? I think when I was trying to test this using the AM transmitter, initially this was not working. So I may not have tested the 1U5 with this. So actually, let me go back to this, because I think I wanted far field, and let me just go back to this for a minute. Let's zoom back out. When you're adjusting these trimmers, you need to check, because you're using the radio to tune this, which is most likely what you're going to do. Adjust the tuning a little bit, because I discovered that by tuning it more on signal after I had initially tuned this, and then rechecking, I was able to get more volume, more strength from this signal output of this, and so I got a cleaner and more solid signal from this. So I went from having to have this all the way over here to being able to run it about there. So if you're playing with one of these, tweak your tuning a little bit at the same time as you're playing with this to make sure that it's working the way you want it to. I was rather surprised because I got it somewhat close, but it still didn't sound good. And then I tweaked this a little bit, and the volume came right up, and then I was able to tweak this a little bit more. But one of the things I ran into when I was tweaking this was it seemed to be making this tube ring and feed back more than it did when I had it tuned differently, and it didn't take much. I have made mistakes when aligning radios where the detector tube would misbehave and become very unhappy. Then I'd have to go back and adjust the settings a little bit. I use my signal generator, but sometimes you have to play with it a little bit more, and that's probably why they have you in the instructions going back over the settings more than once to make sure you've got it right. But anyway, so I think the conclusion I've drawn is that the 1S5 tube is just not going to work. Well, do I want to... that one... that's the 1U5. What did I do with the other one? I just for the fun of it. Is this it? What the heck? Why not? Since I've got a third tube, why not try it? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. This tube is working better than the other two. Well, that's interesting. Turn this off for a minute. That was something matter.
Jacked it up, moved all the rubber I could gently, and it still makes the noise. And we're about to get to our line, and we're basically uneven tire wear. So, with all that in mind, continuing on, do I need to boot on, another boot on, replace the struts, or what?
How many miles were on this Lexus? Can you remind us?
Sure, it's 160,000.
Well, that's very interesting.
So you have not fixed the boot? You just cut
I
the
was,
okay.
well, that's interesting. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering, I've got this volume all the way down. If you're wondering why you still hear the radio, I believe that's on purpose because this is a battery-powered set, and one way they can get you to not forget that the radio is on by not allowing the volume control to bring the volume all the way down. So let's go back to this channel and see how it...
Does the aftermarket make a ready strut for that type of vehicle?
Yeah, they should. I believe that we've done some of those.
Yeah, I guess that's the way it is. So, that's really, really intriguing. Well, that may have saved me from doing a lot of work. But I know I've mentioned this before, and I'm thinking, now I'm really in doubt. People I talked to, as I said before, said that the 1S5 has this issue. The 1U5 apparently also has that issue. Now, what's interesting about this 1S5, aside from the fact that it doesn't ring like the other two, is that I get my finger near it and it hums and buzzes, and the other two don't do that. I could get my finger right near the tube and I tap it and it would ring, but I wouldn't get any noise. So it looks like this is designed a little differently. Made in USA. I can't quite make out what this is saying. It's like T. Maybe it says triangle, I'm not sure. I didn't know there was a tube called that. The lettering on this is it's been damaged, and unfortunately you have to grab the tube somewhere to get it out, and I'm not entirely sure. But it's not a brand name I've ever heard of, and well, whatever the case may be, it seems to work better than the other two. And I'm pretty sure I tried this tube in this radio at one point, so I'm not sure why I didn't see that it worked better. I wish, it's been well over a year since I played with this, and it's just been sitting on the shelf waiting for me to come back to it. And as always happens, as frequently happens with me, is I get into a project like this, and I had changed out that tube, and I got it working, but I wasn't happy with it because it required the radio was no longer wired in standard format, and so I was a little bothered by that, and so I just kind of set it aside, thinking, well, I don't know what else I can do with this. I'm not sure what I want to do with this. I don't really want to part with it wired oddly. So I think I just said, well, shrugged my shoulders and set it aside. But I finally said, you know what? I need to start cleaning out stuff. I really do. So that's what got me involved in working on this again. And I'm glad I on a whim I put that in there because it looks like it might work just fine. But if you run into a 1S5, and it took me, actually, so I had, oh, yes. When I bought this radio, it had no tubes in it. Somebody had scavenged all the tubes out of this, and they had it apart. The speaker was destroyed, and there's some other things they had done. I can't remember what all I had to fix, but it wasn't in great shape when I bought it. But I got it cheap, and but I had to populate it with all new tubes. So the 1S5 was one of the new tubes I put in. So I bought 3 different tubes for, well, 4 if you count the 1U5, but 3 different 1S5s for this radio. And this was the one that was gifted to me. Like I said, the pins were rather corroded. I had to sand it to make proper contact. But of the 3, that's the best working tube. So so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this all back together, put it back in its case. I may try to tweak the alignment a little bit. So I think, I don't know if this tube behaves the same as the other two. Since it's the detector tube, it's further away from the IF chain, so it may not matter. But it probably wouldn't hurt to double check and see that I've got it right. Now, I've mentioned so many times, people are probably tired of me saying this, but I live in an area where reception is not great. When we get into the winter months, a radio like this with 3 sections to its tuner will pick up amazingly well. We're getting into that season where I should start seeing better reception coming from my old AM radios. This, I remember this was a pretty good performer once I got it all done. So, so I think basically I'm kind of surprised. I'm remembering back, and I could swear I tried this tube in there, and I don't understand. Well, anyway, my memory being what it is, I'm not entirely shocked that I don't remember. All right, I'm going to put this back together. Well, actually, I'm going to do a quick check of the tuning or the alignment. Then I'm going to put this back in its case, and I think I'm going to show you it all back together and working. I don't know if I'm going to be able to improve on this or not. I do remember I had to do something with this, and I ran into some grief. So I had to take something apart on this, which involved taking this apart, taking the tuning string off, and well, if you go back to the videos on this radio, you'll find one of them where I learned a better way of restringing this than what I originally had. It's interesting, the radio, this has got a tape for a tuner. It's a tape that's moving back and forth in here. So the tape moves and this line stays in one spot. Alright, well, I'm going to do a quick check of the alignment, and now you may have noticed this antenna. This came off from an old radio. I've kept it because I thought it might be useful. It's working well enough for just playing with the radio, but since the front end and the antenna are part of a tuned circuit, it's possible that antenna is not the best choice. And the other thing is that when you have these long cables hooking up even the right antenna to the radio, it can affect the performance of the radio because they didn't factor in this extra wiring when they were tuning the circuit. They probably tested it with this length of wire, and which if you get a radio and this wire is missing, I would probably recommend that you don't give in to the temptation to put a longer a wire that's longer than it needs to be. It might be more convenient, but it might also affect how the radio plays. So anyway, when I get this done, I'll come back and show you what I've got. Okay, it's back together. I've got it playing. It's on 810. Yeah, it's pretty close. If I ground this with my thumb, it sounds better. But here's the thing. This
just sold her house with Kevin Clancy. She's now down in warm Texas.
This radio. Now you saw how it played with the other antenna. It did not it did not pick up anything in the middle of the band. One of the nice things about this little radio is that it's got this extra RF amp beginning of the circuit, and a number of the radios that I have that have that extra tube there perform similar to this. Now newer radios don't have that extra tube in there, and I think it's because they've improved the antennas. They have the ferrite core rod antennas, maybe better circuitry, same tubes. Well, this is battery powered, but I've got radios that have not got the extra RF amp at the beginning, and they don't have the better antenna, and they don't perform as well. But on newer radios, tube radios, solid state, they seem to have figured out how to get maximum signal strength without that extra stage, which of course, if you can do that, it saves money. So, see, I don't know if I can get... Well, I was picking up 590, and I don't know why I'm not right now. The other thing I had to do after I... Yeah.
For your needs, right?
That's why the manufacturers are coming out with motors in their heavy trucks. They found that they were having a group of people that were forced into a product to get the need that they have, but not people that should own them.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused them nightmares in their service side of things.
Yeah. Okay.
For someone who's never owned a diesel is remarkable. That'll do this hour of the Under the Hood Show. Until next time, you can always find us at underthehoodshow.com, and don't forget, you can watch the show on our YouTube channel.
With
All right.
Russ Evans,
So it's all together. It's working properly. Did I finish what I was saying earlier? I don't know. that one of the downsides of that tube that I put in there was that the pins were corroded. I had done some work on it, cleaning them up. I got this all together and found out that that tube was still not making good connections, so I take it back out, clean the contacts or the pins some more. Now it works the way it's supposed to. And as you'll notice, when I had the other antenna on here, that wasn't working as well as this does with the correct antenna with it. And actually, let's just show you inside. Come on. All right. Notice that the antenna is much larger around than the other antenna. You got the tube chart in there, which is nice. Yeah, so that little pain in the neck was giving me more grief. And this is the this is where the battery would go, and they've got this little connector here. I'm not familiar with all the different types of batteries. I don't recall seeing this on some of the other radios I've worked on, battery powered. I'm sure they, oh yeah, and they show you right here, it shows you use Ever-Ready 753 or General 660A-6F6-5, and they show you that connector that this goes into directly. So there was a battery made that this would work with. It's kind of that annoying thing of, well, why didn't they just settle on one battery type, one connection type, and you know, then we don't have all these different types of connectors and all that good stuff. This is so yeah, this is in really, really good shape considering. Well, when I found this, it had paint spatters all over it. The aluminum was pretty corroded. This is still somewhat beat up. I can't take it out because the rivets are not, you can't remove these. And I don't dare, if I try to lift up here, there's a very good chance this is going to bend in ways I don't like. I don't know that I can, yeah, I don't dare. So, but overall this is in very good shape. It sounds pretty good. It's a good performer. It really does work well. And all I can say is I'm really glad I gave in to my impulse to try that third tube. Not sure what, I just don't know. It's just puzzling to me that I didn't spot that or I didn't see that before I put that other tube in there. It's possible that I didn't use the third tube in there because it was flaky and it didn't want to make the connection. I guess I was fortunate that it did when I tested it tonight, because if it hadn't, well, I don't know if I would have pursued that or not, but of course, in my mind, the issue was that yeah, I don't want to polish on that. I think I've cleaned this already. But in my mind, the 1S5s were junk and none of them were going to work. So it's possible when I tried those two, I stopped there. I almost think I tried the other one, but again, maybe it wasn't working properly even after cleaning the contacts. When I put this all back together, I noticed that as I was tuning this, the signal kept dropping in and out. So as I started checking things, I found out that all I had to do was move that tube a little bit and the signal got a lot louder. So, so I'm glad I spotted that before I considered this done. But now it is done. It is complete. Fini. And so, if you have one of these radios with a 1S5 in it, and all it wants to do is ring and misbehave, you got two choices. Get a 1U5 and rewire the socket for that tube, or you can try multiple 1S5s to see if you find one that behaves better than the ones you have. Those are the only options, really. As you saw, that didn't work. So, It's just one of those things. So yeah, so be aware that there are certain tubes out there that were, I guess you could call them mistakes. They are problem children because they weren't properly engineered to begin with, and so then you have to go looking for an alternative. Where did I put that? I don't know. Oh. Yep, that there for now. That is. I don't know if this is available anywhere, but there is a tube substitution manual or handbook available, so that you can find over 10,000 substitutions, volume 7. Let me just see where that came from. It's like paint. Alright, 1S5, let's check that out, because that's where you want to go. It's pretty amazing that, and they tell you at the bottom, one note is may not work in all circuits. It tells you this one has a parallel filament circuit. This one has a series circuit not requiring controlled warm-up. So those are the notes that need to pay attention to in the bottom. But let's see, let's find our 1S5. And what does it say? 1S5. Well, that's interesting. Okay. 1R5, 1S5. Well, that's really interesting. Let's zip in there a little bit. And, oops. Now, apparently, a 1AF5, 1AH5, or a 1AR5 will work. But it has a star. It says parallel filament circuits. Alright, well, I have investigated this further, and I thought I had it nailed down correctly to begin with, and then discovered I did not. So, my goal is to always provide accurate information, and as I continue to explore and continue to sort out what I thought was conflicting information, I finally got the light. I finally figured it out. I know what's going on. So I was showing you in this book. I'll go to the 1S5 since that's what I'm dealing with. And the problem is that it shows all of these tubes, the 1AF5, 1AH5, and 1AR5, the star, and it says parallel filament circuits. And I was wondering why was that. And then if you go to one of these, it lists the 1S5 in the same way, parallel filament circuits. At first, I wasn't quite sure what they meant when they said parallel filament circuits. My first guess was that it had to do with a transformer powered set, amplifier, radio, whatever, which typically is parallel filament. And I believe that is indeed the correct. I did some other research, and that is indeed what they were talking about. But this is I kind of misunderstood it, because I was thinking, well, why is the 1S5, let's go to the one, let's see, 1S5, I'll grab one of those alternative tubes. Alright, and I want to go to 1AF5, alright. 1AF5. Alright. So you see, right there, 1S5 is listed as a substitution for the 1AF5, and of course they all have parallel filament circuits. I thought, well, that's weird because the 1S5 is being used in a series filament circuit. Well, that's the wrong way to read this. The parallel filament warning only applies if you're trying to use this tube or some of the others as substitutes. I didn't get that right away, and it finally dawned on me. So, what this means is, and I figured it out because I looked up these tubes. By the way, these don't seem to show up in any of the RCA tube models right up through model or volume 30 or 35, I forgot which one I have. But I went to a much newer tube manual. Mine is a 22, revision 22 model, or series, whatever. But, so I went quite a few revisions forward, and it still doesn't list any of these tubes in the RCA manual. Not sure why. Doesn't matter. My point is this. My first thought was, yeah, parallel filament circuits are related to transformer-powered devices, tube devices. I can't think of a time when a transformer-powered electronic tube appliance, tube-type device of some kind isn't parallel. Although there are exceptions, and I don't know how they're set up, but there are some manufacturers, I don't know if Scott was one of them, but some of them actually mix serial filament circuits in with parallel filament circuits. I don't know if the series is connected to the parallel part of the filament, or the transformer. Yeah, that's talk. I don't know if they connect the tubes that are in series to the output of the section of the transformer that feeds the other tubes in parallel. I guess you could do that, but I think your voltages would have to be different, so I don't know how they did that. I never investigated that. So in any case, so here's what I learned. All of these tubes are 25. I have 25 milliamp. They're filaments. 1S5 has a 50 milliampere filament. These are not direct replacements. You cannot just drop in a 1AF5 for a 1S5. Unless these are being used in a parallel filament application. I have no idea if they are, but that's what their note tells you. And in other parts of the manual, there are places where it says parallel filament circuit only. They make it more emphatic. And in the course of playing around with this, I have discovered that tubes can be 25 milliamps, 50 milliamps, 100 milliamps, 150, 300, 175, and they're all over the lot. And so when you're trying to mix and match, or trying to change tubes, you have to be careful, and you have to make sure that, excuse me, you have to make sure that the tube that you're trying to substitute for another tube will indeed work with the circuit you're trying to plug it into. In this radio, all of the tubes except the 3V5 are 50 milliamp tubes. 3V5 is, if it's being supplied 1.4 volts, it is a 100 milliamp tube. If it's being given 2.8 volts, it is a 50 milliamp tube or filament. Increase the voltage, change your current. In this radio, they've set it up so that the 3V4, the voltage drop across that tube is about 2.5, which would put it close to the 50 milliamps of the other tubes, so that it will work well, okay, in this series string radio. So, if you're using a tube substitution handbook, or let me swing over here. I'm going to go here. Nostalgia Era. This is a nice resource. It's got schematics and manuals, which is a lot of stuff. Some of the schematics are not all that great a quality. There's a guy who was named DVD Man or something. He had a DVD with some better quality scans of schematics on it, and I bought that, and I found it to be very useful. But Nostalgia Era is a place where you can find schematics if you can't find them elsewhere. It also has a tube cross-reference section. Garage Sale is not active at the moment. I think References is. I don't know about links to other sites. I didn't look there. Yep, it's there. So it's an interesting place. It's got more stuff going on there than I remembered. This poor site suffered a catastrophic hard drive failure at some point, and they lost a lot of data. And for the longest time, the only thing they had on here was this. But thankfully, they've recently revived more and more of this website. So, for instance, I've got, this is an example, another example, 6135. These tubes are listed as possibles. This is a 175. These tubes are 150 milliamp tubes. So that's why they say it should be parallel filaments. And like I said, in this book, some of the pages, some of the sections talk about parallel filament circuits only. They make it more emphatic. So that's very helpful. Now if you go to Radio Museum, they have a lot of information, and they can tell you a lot about the different tubes. And again, they have crossovers, identical to and then similar. So this is also another resource. Just for fun, do I have, let's go up here. So there's my 1S5, and it shows some other tubes that are identical to this. Never seen or heard any one of those. 1B2. Just curious about that. See if my tube manual has a 1B2. 1B3. No. Again, this is an older tube manual, so maybe a newer one does have those. 1B4, 1B5, 1B7. Yeah. Anyway. So, and if you want to find out more about the 1B2, for example, you can go to that, go to another link, and then they've got information. Is the same in the name for resistor from USA? Oh, so this might be a foreign tube. Base, filament description, diode pentaload special suffix. Okay. Alright, so they give you, it's interesting, they give you some information about the pinouts of the tube, and it looks like some circuit information about how the voltages and how it may be used. There's some German stuff going on there. So anyway, so this radio museum, I am a member, and it's helpful, and you can find. Did I? I think I got rid of it. You can find schematics. Let's see. Do I have reopen? Let's see if this, nope. Let's see. It doesn't matter. If you have the model of the radio, well, let's just do this. 68 L11, I think. No. Is that right? Yes. Why for you, not L? Is L? Oh, there it is. Okay, I'll take a look. Yep, there's my radio. And so you've got, they don't show you the whole schematic. And you can be a guest and download schematics, but they limit you to as far as how many you can do in a day. And there's quite often quite a bit of information that people have downloaded. So that's also a useful resource. But I digress. So the other thing I wanted to mention, now that I've got this sorted out, now that I understand this better, this is what I wanted to really get into to wrap up this video. This is the tube that I had that rubberized wrap on. And the reason I did that was because, and I don't remember if this tube was worse than this one or if they were the same, or I don't know why I chose this tube over this one. But when I was using my AM transmitter to test this radio to see how it would behave, the transmitter was able to give me a stronger signal than the local radio station, and one of the results of that was that this tube would start ringing without me even tapping it. It would start squealing and feeding back. It was really not happy. But if I squeeze the tube like this, the problem would go away. And that's probably what I did when I was testing originally on this radio a year or so ago. And that's probably why I wrapped this one in that rubber wrap that I had on it. Wrapping this with that stretchable rubber material I used for other things didn't fix the problem. It was still bad. I got very fortunate that I found a tube that actually worked. But it's pretty bizarre. Now I've never heard of triangle before, and it turns out, I didn't realize that this is a triangle. The tube is actually working better in here is also a triangle tube. And I don't see any difference exterior-wise. Yeah, I don't see any difference. This is the RCA that was wrapped in rubber. I don't see a difference. I looked at this one and compared it to the triangle tube I have in there, and I don't see the difference in there. But it's working, and now I am going to test this and let it run for a while and see if it continues to behave itself. If it does, then I'm good to go. If not, I may see if I can find substitutes through the Radio Museum. The tubes they list there are different than the ones that are in this substitution manual. Now, theoretically, this substitution manual says that they look for tubes that are better performing and all kinds of stuff. They what what do they say? Where is it? Okay. Let's see, where is it? Let's see. Oh, yes. The tube substitutes are only those tubes which have similar or improved characteristics and can be inserted directly into the socket. No rewiring or mechanical changes are needed, although associated service controls may have to be readjusted. The problem with this is that when you have a tube that's being used in a series circuit and they say parallel filament circuit, then that's not entirely useful. Given that this this resource says that there are other tubes that are identical to this. So you can use a resource such as this. I'm guessing, well, there are other tube manuals out there. I think Sylvania, I saw some of those that were there in PDF form. You can look around and see if there are other tube manuals that will have some of these oddball tubes in them. The thing that you really want to be sure of is, I don't see it on this one. Yeah, they don't give you, oh, they do. Okay. Well, that's weird. Oh, that's watts. Usually in here they give you the current that the tube, 025, which means that that will not be a good substitute for this tube, which is 50 milliamps, 0.05. So anyway, I don't want to wander any further down this rabbit hole. There are some resources you can use. Just make sure that when you're trying to substitute a tube that you get something that matches as closely as possible. One of the key things you want is for it to be the same current rating as the tube you're replacing. If you don't do that, it can cause problems. It'll affect the performance. You can actually prevent your radio from playing because only some of the tubes are going to light up because of the other tubes that you substituted in. So just be aware that you can cause yourself some headaches if you don't match the tubes. If you don't match the tubes properly. So the thing I want to wrap up with is this. Can you use a tube that is microphonic? Well, I believe that the 1U5 tube could work. It was nowhere near as bad as this one or this one. Not as good as the one I have in there now, which is I find pretty amazing. The place or where the tube is being used makes a big difference. If it's one of your output tubes, you don't want to use a microphonic tube. You're just asking for trouble. It'll do bad things. It'll distort. Don't do that. As a detector tube, as long as it's not too bad, I think you can get away with it. I did test this radio with the 1U5 in there, and even though it was ringing when I would tap it, it wasn't horrible. And when I was playing a station through the radio at pretty decent volume, that tube was not misbehaving, not like these other tubes were. So I think that the detector tube location can be okay. I think the bottom line is the tube, is the radio or the amplifier working properly, or is it distorting? Is it doing bad things? That to me determines whether you can just leave a microphonic tube in there. If it's in something, well, back in the days when this had batteries for it, you probably wouldn't want a tube in there that would ring every time you moved the radio. That would be bad. Let me also mention this. this happened to me once on one radio, and it has not happened to me since. But, and I think it was a 40s radio, 8-pin tube, 8-pin tubes in it. I managed, and this radio was extremely touchy about its alignment, and you could misalign it such that it would start misbehaving, and it was turning the detector tube microphonic. Once I got in there and tweaked it back a little bit, and it started working normally, the problem went away. So, I don't know if this is something that you need to be doing, but it might make sense to check to see if the alignment is correct if you have a radio where the detector tube is indeed acting microphonic. Again, it's the only radio there's only one radio I ever had that happen to, and it used the 8-pin octal tubes, not the loctals. Although depends on the circuit. I mean, some circuits they're touchy in certain ways, and other circuits are fine. So, anyway, so I'm going to wrap up with this. I didn't expect to get into all of this stuff, but I hope you found it interesting. I learned some important stuff, and I'm really glad that I learned how to properly use this, and that this isn't the be-all and end-all, because the tubes they recommend are not usable in something like this. It would have been nice if they had provided you with the same resources as the Radio Museum does. It would have been really nice to have the other tubes that are indeed a direct replacement that draw the same amount of current, because then you could use them here. So, I'm wrapping up here. Hope you enjoyed this. If so, click the like down there. If you enjoy what I've been doing on the channel, I hope you'll subscribe. And I hope you'll come back and join me at the next video.